You, a pirate's life for me. Dun, there you are. The new video is ready, and I am, as always, looking forward to your valuable comments.
Is it part 2 of the commentary on part 1 of Treasure Island video? Will we finally be able to continue the story in the book?
No. Unfortunately, that video is not ready just yet. There is, however, another very different subject that we need to get out of the way first.
What might that be, I wonder?
Well, let's see, shall we? Welcome to the Caribbean. Here we are again in the cabin with Oliver and Leah. And Oliver, are your thoughts about space? You most worry about the space in your wallet where your salary was supposed to have been? No. I was thinking about space as in outer space, or perhaps as in space pirates. Huh? No.
Space pirates?
Yes, space pirates. What? You don't like space pirates? Well, why not? They're almost like traditional pirates, sailing the sea of stars.
Sea of stars.
I see. Just a moment. I just remembered a simple matter I need to attend to. I will be back in a moment.
Space pirates. Just like traditional pirates, are they? Let's talk about space pirates.
Yeah, here I am again. Just some quick matter that needed my attention. So as I said, space pirates are almost like traditional pirates, except that there are no sharks in the Sea of Stars now, is there?
Exactly. Proper pirates get eaten by sharks.
Well, I don't know about that, but as I was going to say, space pirates might seem similar to normal pirates if you ignore the important fact that without space sharks, they do not get eaten by sharks like real pirates are.
Exactly. For a moment there I feared that you had not considered this matter properly.
Oh, but of course, there is no way I would ignore such an important factor. Not only a very important element indeed, but it alone could be said to be sufficient reason for creating a video on space pirates, since I also feel that it is something that many have not considered properly. So I am glad that you can help me finally set the record straight once and for all.
Ah, a very good point. I will certainly do my best to help clear up any misconceptions.
Marvelous. Well, then let's keep going. Leah, what about you? You think much about space pirates? Do you? No, not really. No. Okay. Well, then I have good news for you because today we are going to look at that eternal question of whether space pirates are proper pirates or not. Yes. Yeah, you think that's quite interesting, I see. Well, yes, so on to the analysis. Space, the final frontier. Today we will boldly look at the question of whether space pirates are proper pirates or not. And by stating the question of whether something is a proper something or another, we first need to define what we mean by that something. In the case of pirates, there is of course the legal definition, which for Earth is defined in the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea as what can be simply summarized as the act of robbery on the high seas. Or to be more exact, in Article 101 of this law, we find the following. Definition of piracy. A. Any illegal acts of violence or detention or any acts of depredation committed for private ends by the crew or the passengers of a private ship or private aircraft. Blah 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 blah. One interesting detail. To be an act of piracy, as defined in this law, it must be committed on the high seas, that is, outside of 12 nautical miles of territorial waters around the nation-state. So, to qualify as a pirate by this definition, one cannot undertake one's acts of robbery too close to land. It would not be piracy. Another interesting detail. The law defines piracy not only as something that is done by ship, but also by aircraft. In other words, by air pirates. A subject we will hopefully return to at another time. Unfortunately, the legal definition is not very useful for our purposes. The pirates we are talking about are the pirates of fiction and romanticized history, sailing the Caribbean in the golden age of piracy, looking for gold to plunder. We are talking about the pirates of books like Treasure Island and movies like Pirates of the Caribbean. And while these pirates might qualify as pirates under the legal definition, so do naturally also modern pirates. There are videos on YouTube about modern piracy with millions of views, so there's obviously interest in the topic. But when comparing modern pirates to those of traditional fiction, there are so many differences that falling under the legal definition of piracy might for all practical purposes be the only thing they have in common. If I am looking for a pirate game or movie, something related to modern piracy would not have the pirates I would be looking for. The time period, the boat types, the weapons, the aesthetics, the historical context. To use a vague and not very well-defined term, the feeling of the setting would be too different. There is also the fact that modern-day pirates are an actual issue, with problems related to both the conditions that lead to piracy and the risks it poses to shipping and sailors. Fictional pirates are much more suited for entertaining escapism. So, when asking if space pirates are proper pirates, what we are essentially asking is if space pirates can be like the type of pirates associated with the golden age of piracy, or if they would necessarily be more like those of modern times. So what do we actually mean when talking about space pirates? With space piracy not being a thing on Earth currently, and not even being legally defined, we are evidently now talking about science fiction. So shouldn't these pirates be even more removed from traditional pirates than those from modern times? Actually no, there can be surprisingly many similarities, even if there are some important differences, as we shall see. And since we are talking about science fiction, there are no actual limitations on what space piracy might involve, but it would presumably be the act of robbery in space. Someone uses a ship to steal from other ship, with both ships being in space. A legal definition would probably also include an equivalent to the concept of territorial waters. So let us define space piracy as the act of robbery in deep space. And using this definition of space piracy, to what extent can elements of traditional pirate stories realistically be used in a science fiction setting, while still having plausible in-world explanations? Let us break it down. Ships. Traditional pirates travel in sailing ships, or simpler wooden boats. Space pirates would also presumably travel in ships, but in contrast with sailing ships, many spaceship designs would likely be based on having an engine providing propulsion, much in the same way as with current-day ships and boats. However, there are actually some ship designs that use sails, solely sails. So, while there are obvious differences in the medium that is being traversed and the physics involved, it would be possible to create a space pirate story with at least somewhat realistic sail-based ship designs that perhaps even borrow visual elements from traditional sailing ships. Other parts of sailing ships, such as the helm, could also be used. Realistically, what was an appropriate way of controlling a ship moving on a surface might not by itself be the most efficient way of controlling a ship moving in 3D space. However, even if there is no good physical in-world explanation for why a spaceship would have a helm, it does look very nice and traditional, and that in itself might be sufficient explanation for why a space pirate might wish to have a helm in their ship. C. Traditional pirates sail across the seven seas, or at least a subset of them, while space pirates travel across the Sea of Stars. Obviously, these are not the same, but there are some similarities. A pirate that falls out of a sailing ship will risk drowning, and of course being eaten by a shark. So, Don, I used one of your pictures for this illustration, but I'm not sure if I entirely understand what is going on. So I hoped you would explain. It looks like some pirates had their ship sunk, but everyone seems to show more merriment than I would have expected under the circumstances.
Oh, it's a kind shark that is assisting a group of pirates after their ship sunk.
I see. Those two inside the mouth of the shark, they are not being eaten.
No. The shark is helping them, carrying them away from the shipwreck.
And is this usual shark behavior? I would expect there to be more consumption of pirates and less good spirits.
Perhaps. But I wanted to create something that could help improve the public image of sharks.
I see. That makes sense. And the background, are those sharks in the sky?
Yes, I call it the annual migration of the sharks.
That is also part of the shark image improvement campaign, I assume?
Yes, I know humans like birds to fly and migrate. So if they associate sharks more with birds, elegantly soaring through the sky, perhaps people like sharks more.
Well, yes, maybe. I can at least say I understand the logical structure of your argument.
Eating humans would also be a lot simpler. No need to wait for them to fall into the water.
Yes, convenient, I'm sure. But perhaps leave that last detail out of the campaign. Just a suggestion.
Ah, thank you. A good idea. I'll make a note of that.
While a space pirate that for some reason ends up outside a spaceship in the vacuum of space will similarly die due to lack of oxygen, or some other problem related to being in vacuum, unless a properly working spacesuit is worn. But what about sharks in space? Space is not known for its abundance of sharks, unfortunately, but there are science fiction stories with space whales and similar creatures. So there's really nothing that prevents the creator of a science fiction story from introducing something like space sharks to their story, is there now? Where there are space whales, it would be natural to assume that there would also be space sharks that eat them.
Oh, that's actually a very good point that I had not considered. And it makes perfect sense. What would be the point of having space whales if there are no space sharks around to eat them?
Well, I'm glad to see that you are getting into the spirit of the wonders of space, at least.
Yes. Just thinking about it makes me hungry. When we are finished here, I think I will order me some whale sashimi.
Yes, why not? Weapons. Traditional pirates are associated with weapons like flintlock pistols, rapiers, sabers, daggers, and cannons, with these being weapons available at the time of the Age of Piracy. For a science fiction story with space pirates, the weapons technology would presumably be much more advanced, but there is still room for significant similarities. The use of cannons to fire broadsides into enemy ships could equally be used in space during ship-to-ship combat, even though the payloads would likely be different. Equally, after bombarding a ship to eliminate any offensive capacity, the ship would presumably be boarded. Swinging across to the other ship in the romanticized style of pirate movies and games would unfortunately not be possible due to the way gravity works in space. But if the ships are close enough, using tow lines or shooting grappling hooks might seem a feasible alternative. For person-to-person combat inside a ship, there would probably exist more advanced technology for hand weapons, but there is a practical limitation on what types of weapons could be used. Firing a weapon that risks puncturing a hole in the walls of the ship would potentially destroy everything of value inside it, if the insides are exposed to the vacuum of space. Limitations like this could provide explanations for why low-powered weapons or hand weapons such as sabers are used during boarding. Pressure. A world where any material can be simply or cheaply created or converted from other materials would likely not have resource shortages. But without this type of technology, there would still be a need for raw materials used in the production of other stuff, and there would naturally be some places where there's more of some materials than others, making it necessary to move cargo between planets. Some ships would presumably contain cargo of huge value, and attacking these ships to steal their cargo would be attractive. And as for gold and silver, some way of storing value is required in most societies, and gold has a nice way of staying unchanged across the ages. So as long as it still retains its relative rarity, it could remain something worth keeping or stealing, also in a science fiction scenario. Also, space pirates could dream of robbing a treasure fleet filled with gold, and then hide their newfound treasures on some little-known planet, much in the same way as traditional pirates would bury their treasures on an unpopulated island, and then create a map marked with X pointing the way to the treasure planet. Aesthetics. For a science fiction story set in the future of Earth, there would be nothing unusual about pirates using the aesthetic of traditional pirates. Images like the Jolly Roger was used by pirates to incite fear in their enemies, and using the well-known imagery would immediately create associations to traditional piracy, hopefully achieving the same effect. There could also be simpler motivations, such as wanting to use the style or to preserve tradition. For societies that have no knowledge of Earth or its history, it would be somewhat eye-raising for space pirates to have the exact same style as pirates from Earth, but skulls, skeletons, and similar imagery that gives associations to death should be universal enough to get away with using a style based on these elements. Technological limitations. One of the more significant differences between traditional pirates and those of modern day is in the ability of the modern nation-states to protect against piracy. Information availability and significant power projection capabilities places practical limitations on how piracy can occur, resulting in modern pirates often using small motorboats. With radars, satellites, planes, drones, and who knows what else to monitor the seas, it becomes simple to track and destroy any pirate that attempted to amass a fleet of larger ships that could be used against modern warships. This is in stark contrast with the age of piracy, in which there was much less information available, no emergency broadcast systems, less cooperation between nation-states, and communication could take weeks or months to reach its destination.
This picture again. Let me guess. Comedic effect?
Ah, yes, that's correct.
Not much point in noting that the donkey pose would not be used to deliver messages across the ocean then.
No, that's a little too evident, isn't it? In addition to the obvious absurdity, I'm going for a running gag here, referencing our last episode.
Oh, marvelous. I guess I can expect to be seeing this image again later then.
You know me too well. With no planes, conflicts at the high seas were limited to ship-to-ship battles, which at least potentially could be less one-sided than what would be the case today. In space, similar technological limitations could again apply, depending on the technology level of the setting. Space is vast, and if travel and communication is limited by the speed of light, the ability of the equivalents to nation-states to monitor and react to acts of piracy would be much more limited. A pirate ship could be long gone and difficult to find by the time any space navy could arrive. Important trade routes could be patrolled and important cargo transport be given escorts, but if the routes are many and long enough, most ships would likely need to be able to protect themselves. Meaning that the ships that pirates would attack would be much weaker than any space navy ships. Much more like the situation was in the golden age of piracy than it is today. Historical context. Another important part of the golden age of piracy and how it is portrayed in books and movies is the political situation at the time. After an age of discovery, there followed a period of colonization, with the European powers competing with each other for overseas colonies and the resources from them. The major European kingdoms had complex and changing relationships, at times at war with each other, other times cooperating. For the colonies, wars between the colony powers could lead to wars between colonies, attacks by privateers on ships, and to colonies changing hands. A science fiction story set in space would work well with a similar setting, but instead of countries, the wars and conflicts would be between empires that controlled one or more planets. Space exploration, colonization, wars, privateering, and piracy. A convincing setting with many of the same conditions that existed in the 1600s and 1700s, and that contributed to the golden age of piracy being possible. It almost writes itself. The Fantastical. For those that prefer the pirates with a touch of the supernatural or fantastic, who knows what is lurking in the eternal light between stars? And for those that are tired of seeing Cthulhu everywhere, how about some space sharks?
Oh, okay. You have convinced me. My negative feelings about space and space pirates appear to have evaporated. Even though this picture looks like it was thrown together in a hurry, I appreciate the thought behind it.
Well, thank you. That is certainly good news. Findings and conclusions. So in conclusion, yes, space pirates can be proper pirates. Not only that, even though some of the authenticity is lost, by combining pirates with space, you can end up with something that is much more than the sum of its parts. It's a bit like being right-handed and entering a sword fight with the sword in the left hand. You're basically saying, sure, I could have used a sleek and optimally built spaceship to fight you, but I won't. Instead, I will use a ship constructed based on an ancient design meant for wooden ships sailing on the oceans of Earth, and I will still beat you without a challenge. Terrifyingly awe-inspiring self-confidence. And this I like very much. We also see that we now have a set of criteria for evaluating how piratey a given story about space pirates is. This might come in handy at a later date.
It looks like there's some stylistic difference for some of the elements in this list?
Ah, yes. You know, for empathy's sake.
Oh, I see.
But for now, that was all we had to say about Space Pirates. That was certainly interesting. You also think so, Leon? Well, okay. What about you, Oliver? Feel like leaving the Caribbean for the Sea of Stars? Yeah? You'd rather be eaten by an Earth shark, not a space shark? Prefer not being eaten at all, but well, thank you for making me aware of the dilemma, if nothing else. And here I think we'll end it. And we'll just have to see where the future brings us. Whether it's the Seven Seas or perhaps even beyond. So, goodbye and adieu. So, Dum-Dum, it seems like your feelings on Space Pirates have improved a little.
Yes, I must admit that is the case. The possibility of space sharks have made the idea of space much more palatable.
Well, if space pirate eating space sharks show up in some kind of story, we will without a doubt have a look at it at some point.
That I look forward to.
So, in conclusion,
Yay,
Space Pirates!